everyone, what's going on? Thanks for tuning in to Relevant Jukebox, and today I'm here with a special video for you. So a couple weeks ago, I was able to sit down with Caleb of the Lost Chair Society for my first interview ever, which was really cool. Huge shout out to Caleb for reaching out. It was a really good conversation. We talk a lot about music, about album reviews, some of my influences, and kind of where I come up with some of this stuff. Now, it's a little bit more of a lengthy interview, but I wanted to bring it onto the channel in case you had not seen it. And I'm gonna also have links down below to the Lost Chair Society. Make sure you hit that link, give them a subscribe, tell them I sent you. And without further ado, my first interview conversation.
Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the Lost Chair interview series. My name is Caleb Joseph. Today we have a special guest, Relevant Jukebox. He's a music connoisseur of sorts with a YouTube channel oriented toward analyzing media, usually focusing on critiquing albums. Apologies in advance, we had a little bit of internet trouble, which I had to edit around. I don't think it impacted too much of the interview, but nevertheless something to note. Otherwise, please enjoy our conversation. First off, thanks for coming out, dude. We both have our coffees.
Thanks for having me, dude.
Yeah, of course.
Right.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. What do I call you? Do I call you Relevant Jukebox? Do I call you Chris? I didn't even know you.
You can call me Chris.
Okay. Chris, nice to meet you. To some degree in person. And yeah, I guess
Yeah.
Cool. So right off the bat, what is it that you do on just to give a little context?
Yeah. I guess it kind of started as an idea through my Instagram page. I kids a lot of music, and I used to run a record label, and I shut that down, and I got a lot of inspiration from a lot of peers around me to kind of just start talking about music that I enjoy, because it's something that I do, and obviously something that people on the internet wouldn't see if they didn't know me in person. So I started on Instagram with kind of like a format to kind of like try to sell you on a record in a minute or less. Because at the time, Instagram only allowed a minute for a video.
Right.
There was no Instagram TV back then. So I kind of thought like, maybe there was an opportunity to tap into that in a way. And I also kind of thought it was cool that, the internet in general just kind of allows music listeners to connect, but also share their opinions openly about what they're consuming, and that's kind of like where it started. So from there, I started kind of getting this feeling that I was really constrained. Like, there was more I wanted to say beyond a minute for some certain records.
Right.
So that's where I made the YouTube, started filming myself, just writing notes, filming it, and then putting it out there, seeing what happened. And then I've kind of like shifted back to Instagram as more of like a like a meme community in a way recently. So
yeah,
that's kind of like what it was. And I guess like the inspiration behind it was more just because I thought about like, wow, wouldn't it have been cool to like go back in time to really hear like a music fan's opinion on a record like the Velvet Underground and Nico when that was coming out, and instead of reading like a Rolling Stone article or something, like I wanted you to hear an opinion of someone that was, out there in the music community.
Yeah. It's also interesting.
So that was kind of started.
Yeah. I find it also fascinating with kind of the ubiquity of the video platform. It's very different than reading a review of music. And in your case, like just watching your videos, like there's something much more interpersonal about it. And even like the background you use, there's something kind of like almost cozy about it. I feel like I'm in a room just like chatting it up with you. And that gives it like a
Nice.
very different feel. As opposed to like, reading like a critique on it, even something like Pitchfork or what have you. So it definitely is a different lens. I want to kind of parse through a few of the things that you talked about. It sounds like you've been into music for quite a while and started off with a label. How did you come into that, and what prompted you to kind of move into a different direction?
So I guess, I had started a label with a close friend of mine. Probably, I think it was around 2014 or something like that, and a lot of it was kind of sparked from again, a lot of peers around me. I had a friend who had just taken a venture and started his own label,
Mm.
and me and my buddy were kind of like, well, our taste is a little different, and I think that we have, a little bit more. We could do it. Like I don't play music. That's the thing that I think maybe a lot of people might think I do. I don't know if they do. I don't. I really don't know.
Mm.
But I was like, hey, like I want to get into the music industry in some way. It's not going to be in a band right now. So how can I do that? And I went to school for business, and I kind of was like, I saw like vaporwave labels popping up, making cassettes, and I did some research with my friend, and we found a duplication.ca, which is out of Canada, that produces some really cool, colorful cassettes. And through that, we were like, let's go for this. And it started as more like a small local community thing because we had a lot of friends in local bands and they needed merch. And we were like, let's do that. And
Mm.
then it kind of branched out beyond that. I got in touch with um, a few artists that I actually was kind of surprised I got in touch with. One being Georgie, who goes under the moniker Bulldog Eyes.
Oh, okay.
And so I put out some of her like lo-fi records that really connected with me. I was really going off of like what I enjoyed, and we developed a relationship through email. Put out some of those records that opened some more door. And I guess I kind of stopped doing it because it didn't really make me feel good at the end of the day.
Mm.
Um, I started to develop a lot of like almost like trust issues with people through the internet because of it. Because I had a lot of releases that got taken away from me from bigger labels, and the kid that I
I see.
started the label with ended up we kind of just separated
Mm.
because of I'll cite creative differences without getting into it, but
Mm.
that had a lot to do with it. And I was like, like this isn't really getting me any energy anymore. I just feel defeated, and I was kind of sick of trying to impress people like myself, like what I mean,
Yeah.
just like trying to get them to buy something or whatever. It just kind of felt weird. So that's why I kind of shut it down, and I was glad I did it. And I guess the inspiration then shifted towards let's start talking about music because I put other people in my shoes that, were around me. I try to put them in my shoes of saying like, they always ask me like, how did you get into music? How did you get into all of this stuff? And where do you find it?
Mm.
And, I was fortunate enough to have a couple shortcuts, either with friends or bands. So I was like, why don't I try to be that shortcut for some people? So that's
Right.
kind of like where I went with it.
Mm. It's funny. eh, there's a lot of crossover between people who are, just passionate about music in whatever form that takes. But then there's like this like ominous entity of like the music industry. So I think like it totally makes sense. Like, you have a passion for music and you want to follow where that leads. And in the case of like an indie label, you can often be at the bane of some of those darker sides of the music industry. And that's what it sounds like, at least from your story. Now, that
Yeah.
being said, I think the direction that you then took it is fascinating, because there is this kind of like blossoming scene now of people critiquing music or just kind of giving their, like you said, these shortcuts to finding new music and allowing people access to these really cool artists that maybe they wouldn't otherwise hear. Um, so I guess my next question would be, so your next step was to create content that allowed people and or that shared music that you enjoyed with people. How do you go about finding that music? What's your process to coming across, a new album or a new artist?
It's a good question. I guess I've had a lot of different routes or sources. There's not really one particular place. I don't have like a music profile or anything like that. I'm not really a
Mm.
part of any Facebook groups. I don't even have a Facebook actually. So I find music through Mainly like Twitter is a big one.
Mhm.
And then through friends, people send me a lot of music too.
Right.
Um, and folks to follow, right? Like I follow all the publications, like all the big ones that most people follow, like your Pitchforks, your Stereo Gums, your Anthony Fantanos
Yeah.
of the world. Um, and I get a lot of suggestions through those routes. But then I also follow labels specifically. I think that's like a really good source to find stuff.
Mhm.
And other artists, right? Like sometimes they'll talk about people that they're interested in, and I guess that's where I kind of like do it nowadays.
Mhm.
Before I was doing that, I was mainly going to shows, almost like so frequently. Like I think in 2015 I probably went to like 85 shows
Wow.
throughout the year, and like really getting immersed in like seeing who's on the bill, and looking at the schedule of who's coming through. And if I see an artist maybe I saw already, I'll be like, oh, who are they playing with? Why are they playing with this artist? And I'll check them out.
Mm.
Maybe it's a feature of a song that came out, stuff like that is really where I
Yeah.
got it from. There was one more kid. I feel like I almost feel like I have to mention him.
Okay.
He was a Twitter account that I don't know who he was, but he went under the handle of like New Dawn Fades. I don't know if any like if he. I mean, he's pretty known. I think he had a lot of followers, but man, that kid, whoever he is, he would share so much music that I had never even heard of,
Huh.
and it was really like insane. Like he would expose me to like everything in a way. He's not active anymore. At least I don't follow him anymore. Um, he deleted his account or something, but he was a source for sure. And like he was a
Yeah.
big inspiration for me to try to like be a source.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he was big.
Cool. I think I missed the boat on him because I'm not familiar. But yeah, it's cool regardless. It's cool to get some kind of insight into, where you find your music and different sources. And seems like a pretty eclectic variety of sources for finding that music. Like you mentioned Anthony Fantano, who I definitely do see some similarities in your work to his. Of course, you take your own kind of unique route to doing it, but were there people like that kind of laid groundwork for you, or did you feel like you were kind of, starting something from scratch?
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, I feel like I would be a bull-faced liar if I didn't say that, I was inspired by Anthony Fantano. I
Yeah,
mean, we all kind of are, I think, in a way, like as music fans now, which is a beautiful
absolutely.
thing, I think. And for me, I was inspired by someone like him, not as much in like directly what he says about records and his critiques, right?
Hmm.
Because I'm fully aware that it's a subjective material, and that is everyone's own opinion. And
Yeah,
it's something I've grown to appreciate. But what inspired me is more of like the volume and velocity that he would do it at, and how
yeah,
consistent it was. And it was one of those things where I was like, I don't really draw inspiration from another person as far as how I critique a record. Like I don't go into it being like, oh, I think they'll think this, so this is what I'm gonna think
right,
about.
right, right, right.
I kind of just like do it by feel.
Hmm.
And that was one thing that I think somebody told me a while ago, is that I describe records how they feel when you listen to them. I don't know if that's something I do on purpose or not, but that's kind of like where I start. If I do end up like critiquing something,
Yeah,
because not at the end of the day, like, I've had people get mad at me for stuff I've said and whatever, and it's not never personal, and
yeah,
I don't know how to explain that to people. Um, if anything, I,
yeah,
I get more enjoyment out of making people laugh, as far as like something that could be relatable that I say, or I don't know, I try to make a joke. Like I really want
yeah,
it to be like personal, and because I feel like people have these kind of conversations like I try to have in closed doors. It's like I'm bringing that to the public so you see it,
yeah,
because I know there's plenty of people that are super savage about critiquing music that
yeah,
wouldn't ever share that opinion. And I'm like, well, let's start sharing that opinion, because let's
yeah.
get it out there. Why not?
Yeah, I think, even if you are critiquing something, maybe in a more negative light, if you're framing it as, it is something subjective and it's an opinion, but you're still providing reasons why you have this opinion. I obviously I am in the lane of like someone who thinks, of course, that's entirely fair. Even if I disagree, like I would never, take it as a personal attack. I think part of the internet is like there is that camp that it's kind of a lost cause to try to, explain that point of view. But at the end of the day, like
Yeah.
it seems like there's always going to be those folks, but if you're creating content that isn't setting out to like hate on anyone or like shit on any like group of people, then the overwhelming majority will be positive. um with that being said, I noticed in my experience going through your videos, they do tend to be pretty positive. Like you will have your critiques here and there, of course, um, but I can't recall a video where I've seen you outright, shitting on someone. Maybe there's like the rare occasion where it was perhaps deserved, maybe for like a lack of artistic effort. But by and large, I would say the vast majority of what I've seen is, if not positive, at least constructive. Is that something you consciously try to do, or is that just kind of your personality translated onto your platform?
I think it's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
For me, it's tough because I find it very easy to talk about things that I like. And there's a lot of stuff I like, like at the end of the day, like I'm a lover of music, and there's a lot of it I like, and
Mhm.
sometimes if I find a record that is from somebody that I'm aware of, an artist, whatever, and I don't like it, I try to find reasons where my critiques would be valid as in an open forum space to say, meaning,
Mhm.
I've had conversations with people about music all the time, and their critique is mainly like, I don't like it. And I don't think that's like not a valid critique, because I feel that way a lot of times too. But how much value am I adding if I just say I don't like something, unless I
Mhm.
have something like kind of really like critical to say. And I mean, it's weird. Like I work a full-time job, and like I try to balance this with that. And there's times where there are records that I don't like that, and it comes out at the same time as something I really like. And I want to talk about the stuff that I like. And, part of the selection process of artists or albums that I choose to review is a curation of some
Mhm.
sort. Because, one thing I kind of recognize, maybe if I go back to Anthony Fantano, for example, um, he's putting a video out for a reason
Mhm.
a lot of the times. And you can recognize that as far as like a pattern, where sometimes I would be like, wow, why didn't he review this record? Or why didn't he say this? Or why is it these records that he's going for? And you can kind of see like
Mhm.
where he's bridging a gap between indie and mainstream in that sense. And for me, I like to think that the records I choose is a direct reflection of my personal taste. So if I'm critiquing a record that I don't like, it's probably coming from a source where I've gotten some sort of enjoyment at some point.
Right.
I just don't find value in talking about an artist or a record that I have absolutely no interest in. I mean,
Right.
maybe if somebody asked me, but I don't really get that many questions about certain records that I like or not, and at least right now. But that's why. So it's like
Mhm.
I won't put it out for any sort of reason.
Right.
That's kind of where I get it from.
Right. Yeah. I honestly, like, I feel like that translates. Because a lot of your reviews, it does seem like you're passionate about what you're talking about. I'll be honest, like a good portion of your reviews are albums or artists that I didn't know of beforehand. And so hearing someone like you speak passionately on those albums or about those artists definitely is much more of a draw to make me want to listen to those folks. Um, my next question, I guess, would be, um, what happens, when you come across an artist that you do have a positive anticipation for, and they end up kind of dropping the ball? Obviously, as a fan of someone, you want them to put out good music, but I do feel like there's almost this flip side. It's a bit of an internet thing where negative videos tend to go a little bit further, at least like in terms of the algorithm.
Oh yeah.
How do you find that balance? Because
Hmm.
it's not like you said, you don't want to go out of your way to like shit talk an artist or something, but a lot of times like that is the more effective way to reach an audience.
Yeah, I totally agree. I've noticed that myself. Just like, either tracking, analytics or kind of just like seeing what views get what. I guess the best example I could use recently, I mean, this has happened to me a couple times. The first time it happened when I was reviewing on Instagram, and I had reviewed Pierre Bourne's album. I don't even remember what it's called, which is terrible, but the purple cover one. I basically critiqued it, and I was eating strawberries while I was doing it. I don't know if that rubbed people the wrong way, but I'm sure it did. But like, he was an artist where I thought had a lot of potential,
Mhm.
and I obviously was an admirer of his work with Playboy Cardi, and I was like, oh, this guy's gonna take the next step. And when it was just like not what I was expecting, it's funny, in those moments I almost feel like more inspired to say that what I think, because it's to I mean, obviously I don't expect them to listen to it, but I
Mhm.
like my review, but um would to get people thinking otherwise, because
Yeah.
either that, or if there was other people that felt like what I felt like and they just didn't want to say it, it's like, well, I'm going to say it because maybe
Yeah.
that artist can improve if it reverberates. And like, I got a ton of shit from that. And then the other one recently was with Hum, with their recent comeback record. I mean, I've been an admirer of Hum for a while.
Mhm.
They were a band that was turned on to me a long time ago. And that new record, I had my thoughts and feelings of it.
Mhm.
And man, that's my most reviewed, or my most viewed review. And if you look through the comments, people just are like up in arms about it. And it's interesting because um, I wasn't just going out there just to like it on Hum, because they're
Yeah.
a great band, and but um, I do think there is some sort of value that can be added as being a devil's advocate. And if I
Absolutely.
was
Yeah.
to reveal something that I observed, yeah, like about like reviewers in general, is not a lot of them do it tactful. I can say that right. The only one that does is Anthony Fantano. I feel like for me with him, there's times where it's gotten to a point where he's going to pick up on everything on the record, right? And he
Mhm.
knows what the appeal comes from with the record, because he's got a real keen finger on that, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I think he chooses to critique it and give a bad score on purpose in order to create a dialogue. And he's said that multiple times, but he hasn't really revealed it publicly. But My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, probably going to be the best example of that. I think he
Yeah.
gives that a 6 on purpose, because it drives people nuts, and it drives his view count forward, and it gets people talking about him. It's pretty
Hmm.
genius,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think,
That,
if that's
that's
really what he's doing.
That's really interesting.
So,
I never thought about it that way. I definitely like in terms of the My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, like that absolutely sparked a dialogue. And I don't know what the analytics on it are or anything, but I'm absolutely like most people I know that know of the needle drop know him through that review.
right.
So yeah, I
Hmm.
mean, what you're saying absolutely does make sense. Now, I don't know the guy, like I don't know his approach to any of this stuff. Um, but it is really interesting. I think in your case, y- it's interesting because I do feel like you straddle the line more towards the indie side of things. And feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, but that's definitely the sense I get. I feel like you probably have a lot more niche kind of fan bases and a lot more maybe smaller fan bases, but more cult like, much more invested in the artist, seeing your reviews. So a negative review
Hmm.
of a band like Hum will probably be received very differently than a negative review of some kind of like, I don't know, Imagine Dragons or something that has like a massive fan base, but it's like
Right.
such a vague demographic. Do you find
Yeah.
that to
And
be the
you
case?
almost
Like,
like expect it.
yeah, exactly.
Huh?
Do you find that to be the case though? Like, have you ever given a negative review to like this super underground artist and just gotten shit for it?
Yeah. So, okay. Yeah. So KDD, I think that was an example of that. I am a huge fan. I have been for a while.
Mhm.
And she's someone that I was hoping to try to release music with. Obviously, since Orchid Tapes kind of went under, but that didn't happen. But I didn't care for the new record, and I said it, straight
Yeah.
up, why I care. And I, I feel like I was a little harsh on the score, but truthfully, I mean, it was a reflection of how much I felt like I didn't want to revisit the record. So like, if I didn't want to, like, why would I think you would want to? So I gave it that score, and it's
Right.
interesting. She ended up tweeting about it, which I thought was crazy. Um, that was interesting. Um, and I don't know. I kind of felt bad about it, but at
Yeah.
the same time, like, I'm not really 100% sure if she was following me already, and like kind of, because it almost was like, I don't know, the tweet was almost like out of respect in a way. It was interesting.
What
Uh,
I don't know if you recall or if you even want to get into it, but what was the tweet generally?
um, so I had done a review, I had done a joke review on the Travis Scott burger, and I gave that a 6, or I think, or something like that. And she tweeted a screenshot from my review where the score popped up at a 3.5, and then she tweeted me eating the burger, and it was like, "Yeah, you're right. I can't really argue with the burger," or something like that. And
Okay.
I was like, "Oh man, like." No, it's like I didn't mean her to like get. I hope it didn't offend her. She didn't get
Yeah,
upset or
yeah.
anything like that, because yeah, you know what I mean? Because like really inspirational artist, really cutting edge, and
Yeah. Yeah.
that I really hope that like she understands that I know that, and I think that.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, that is the hope. Like we've already kind of touched on it, but at the end of the day, like it is never personal. It's surely just a reflection of, what you as a fan of this person come to hope for from a record. And sometimes it lands, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it lands for a certain sect of fans, and sometimes a different sect may be let down, and vice versa. Um
Mhm.
but yeah, as far as like if you're critiquing music, there are going to be times when for whatever reason, you maybe just don't vibe with a particular record, or kind of expect more, or at least expect something else from a record, right? Um,
Sure.
I think one thing that I'm sure will be interesting for a lot of folks is, as someone who's with a finger on the pulse of the music industry, what are you kind of looking forward to in the new year? What are some maybe releases or artists that you want to hear from?
Um, well, let's see. I mean, it's interesting. I was gonna do a video on that, um, and I
Yeah,
haven't like finished it yet.
yeah, you don't need
But
to drop any content prior to the video if you like,
no,
if you
that's
don't
no,
want to
that's totally
spoil.
fine, because I personally I don't know what I'm gonna say in it, but there's a certain amount of releases that I always look forward to that never come out.
Yeah.
Mainly like, is My Bloody Valentine gonna drop an album? What happened to those EPs that were supposed to come?
Yeah.
So that's something I always long for. That's a big one.
Yep. Yep.
Um, it's always like
There,
an unofficial anticipated
yeah,
every
yeah,
year.
yeah. Yeah, there's
So
those
that
ones that like cross over year after year, and eventually you just like subconsciously you're like, yeah, I want it, but not to like jinx
oh
it
yeah,
or whatever.
not
Like
to expect it.
not to
Yeah,
expect
I
it
mean
at least. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, so that's one
Yeah.
that I always look for. Another long lost record that I've always been anticipating that I don't know what's going to happen with is Chromatics' Dear Tommy. Now, that's one that I've always kind of like heard rumors about, and there's a lot of shit that happened with it. But I
Mhm.
really appreciate Johnny Jewel. He's a big inspiration to me, as just like a person, and how he conducts himself with his business. So I always would love to see that come out.
Mhm.
Um, Other stuff, trying to think like uh, Death Grips. I mean, obviously, like what happened to Death Grips? Are they just going to be an enigma and disappear, or are they, truly going to be coming back randomly? I don't know.
Yeah. I feel like Death Grips definitely thrives off of that anticipation.
I
Um,
agree.
so year in, year out, again, that's a group where I am kind of always kind of hopeful of a record. But I
Mm-hmm.
also know that, almost like sadistically, like that's what they want me to feel,
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean,
Yeah.
there will be a day where I'll do a whole video on death grips in general and just kind of like um, maybe my experiences with them and just things that I think is going on with them and like how they've influenced things. That'll
Mhm.
come in the future, maybe if I, because like I've really, they're kind of like a different enigma in a lot of
Yeah.
ways, I think. Yeah. So, I mean, I'm always looking for that. I'm like, oh, when is Death Grips going to do something? Are they going to do something?
Yeah.
Because I think it's exciting. It's one of the last things that I think was like punk about music in
Yeah.
general. In the industry at large, even like you could say, oh yeah, punk bands are still making records, but that scene to me is very deep fried and burnt out.
Yeah.
But unfortunately,
Death Grips is one of very few that kind of take that punk anti-industry, anti-establishment kind of format.
yep.
Um, I did a an essay on Death Grips in what was it? It was like Death Grips and memetics, like the idea of
Nice.
memes in like a Richard Dawkins like classic meme definition, and I
That's
tried
awesome.
relating the two. It's a bit of a ridiculous essay, but I did touch in on that and kind of how like their experience with labels, and that shit is very punk.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so. I think I've almost noticed too that I think it might the art piece of Death Grips, right? Because I think that was a big part of it right up until Powers That Be,
mhm.
um, is a statement of anti-CIA actually, and the CIA's involvement in the music industry, which is an interesting topic.
Mhm.
If to go off on tangents for days, but yeah. So someday I will make a video about that, like my
I
thoughts around
I
it.
am very much looking forward. Whenever you do decide to do that, I will be one of the first viewers. I guarantee it.
Thanks. Oh,
Anyways, who?
I have one more artist I
Yeah,
wanted
yeah,
to mention
yeah.
actually,
Please.
because now that came to my mind. But Spirit of the Beehive, that is a band that I have a very I'm hotly anticipating their next record. I hope they do something this year. So that was the last one I wanted to throw in there.
Very cool. Very cool.
But
I actually am not familiar with Spirit of the Beehive.
okay, yeah. They're like an indie band from like a rock band from Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Definitely look them up. I think Hypnic Jerks is an extremely innovative rock record in general.
Okay.
It's weird. It's like a mix of like lo-fi music, plunderphonics, but like rock. It's a lot of different things. At least like the direction I think they're going into.
Mhm.
And it's funny because like I have this thing where I saw a meme once that said like, support local music, but be good first, which I thought was like extremely like mean, but like something everybody thinks about sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
And like that band actually kind of like made me not enjoy a lot of other indie rock bands with how much I think how good they are. I think
Like
so.
they just set that bar.
Yes, yeah, I
Yeah.
think they set that bar really high. And it's fascinating. The structures of their songs, it's like you're going through a washing machine. Like you really don't know where you are in it. And there's so many different things I think that are appealing about that band and
Mhm.
intriguing. So
Cool.
definitely give it a look. Check out Hypnic Jerks.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I remembered what my tie-in from way back when was. I'm gonna tie it in now instead though.
Okay.
Just with your analogy of like listening and going through a washing machine. I think that's
Mm,
a really interesting imagery. I just want to. This is probably one of my favorite things about your videos. The idea of you talking about music through the way it feels is really interesting to me. Even someone like an Anthony Fantano or, even myself when I listen to music, I take a very because I have a pretty vast musical background. I spent a lot of my life, learning reading sheet music and learning about harmony and playing different instruments.
mm,
So a lot of my background is very much from the perspective of a music maker. I think it's absolutely fascinating to hear someone review music who has the approach of just like what the fan or the listener who is not a music maker, like what that experience is for them.
yeah.
When you were making kind of these channels, and as you kind of mentioned when you were making the label way back when, was this something you thought about? Were you actively thinking like, because I'm not someone who creates music, I can have maybe how would I say it? Like a more almost like a purified ear. Like I don't know if that makes sense,
Oh,
but
um,
do you know what I'm saying?
yeah. Oh, I know what you're saying. Absolutely. Yeah. It's almost um, like I guess I could compare it to when I went to school for business, but then I switched to film,
Mhm.
and I learned a lot about screenwriting and cinematography and that kind of world. And up until that point, I was just kind of like looking at movies and watching them for the story, guessing where they go, and then once you learn a couple things you can't unsee,
Right.
you kind of start to like branch out and start to appreciate different parts of film. And with music, that never happened to me because I never really was in a band or never really learned music theory. I taught myself guitar for a little while, but I never
Mhm.
really kept up with it. And yeah, I think like it's funny because that was the one thing that actually held me back for so long from doing it, was that thinking, me just myself not being able to really play ball with other people that knew music, that would say, hey, well, you're critiquing this, but that's an unfair critique because there's musicality involved in that you don't understand or something. It was something I was really afraid of actually for a long time, of receiving backlash for that.
Mhm.
And then when I kind of, again, friends around me kind of said like, that doesn't matter. How many people do you know that are in bands, and think about how many people that listen to music. It's
Yeah.
actually maybe more valuable to be able to communicate to those folks, because you're gonna lose them if you're just talking about the musicality all the time,
Mhm.
And that was one of the other things that like pushed me on to say like, okay, I'll just do it, and like if I can make references that are relatable to somebody that has no idea, then you know that's cool, I guess. Maybe that's like what I try to do. And that's kind of where it went from there. Like I didn't really think like, ooh, I'm like this, I have a pure mindset because I'm not exposed to that. But I guess that could be the case. But for me, I actually do try to like understand structures of songs. Like
Mhm.
that's where I got really immersed into like jazz, where jazz, I basically use jazz to study, where I'd listen to it and then immersing yourself in a free jazz album for like a 45-minute track, you're going to come back to a pop song and everything's going to stick out about it to you. And
Right.
I think that's what made me feel like I could like understand things without needing to understand things. And it just kind of went from there, because I was like, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe I should try to just like make this relatable to people that don't listen to music.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'll turn my light on because I'm like super dark right now. I just realized it went from like
Yeah, you
daylight to
slowly
no
gotten
daylight.
darker and darker as we've gone
Hold on.
on.
Let me just flick the light switch on real quick,
For
because I'm
sure.
like, holy shit, it's so dark now.
It's crazy how quickly it got dark.
I know. I can't stand the winter. It's one of those things. I feel like I have like seasonal depression with
Yeah,
that.
I do. So what I do is I just take like a vitamin D and then I try to get as much sunlight as I can. But as you can see, my studio is very dark.
Yeah.
So I need to be yeah, like seasonal affective disorder. It's a real thing. And
Yeah.
it's important to be cognizant of it.
I'm gonna try that vitamin D thing now. Thanks for
Yeah,
that
dude.
tip.
Like one vitamin D tablet every morning, it goes a long way. It does help a lot.
I'm gonna give that a
Um,
shot.
so there you go. But yeah, in terms of what you're saying, like I think if nothing else, it's just a refreshing perspective. I would not argue that, having a music theory background would make you a better or worse reviewer. It just means you would speak in maybe a slightly different language. There's this fun this sorry, I'm gonna ramble a little bit here, but it's a fun story. There's a scientist named Richard Feynman, and the idea is he's walking with his friend, and his friend is this poet and like this artsy type. And the friend sees a flower and he picks it up and he says, you scientists, you'll never understand like why this flower is beautiful. And Richard Feynman says, like, on the contrary, because I know every mechanism of the flower, and because I whatever he says, but like because I know the flower inside and out and on this like deeper level, perhaps I find it more beautiful than you do. And just like that conversation of like, I think it's fascinating. Being knowledgeable doesn't necessarily mean that you're more invested or even like better at talking about music. It's just like a different set of tools to use when analyzing music. And that's my tangent for today. So thank you for listening.
Sweet. No, it makes. I mean,
It's refreshing to hear,
Yeah.
I feel like I don't conversate with too many folks about what I do.
Hmm.
So it's interesting to hear your perspective because it means a lot, obviously. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
cool because I think, at least in the bits that you've told me about how you observe it, like that's exactly what I want you to feel like. So that's awesome.
That's cool. Yeah. Do you find like I've been watching your stuff for a little while now, and it's definitely like picked up a bit of traction over time. Do you have like an overall plan with this, or is it more just like a hobby thing, or like where do you plan on kind of taking this?
Well, I do have a plan. It's probably one I'm not going to reveal though,
Okay.
um,
Yeah, of course.
because I definitely have plans with it.
Hmm.
Um, as far as like its growth rate and all of that, I don't think about it anymore.
Hmm.
I used to, like, I was gonna say like, oh, I'm gonna, you know, get onto this YouTube channel and make a lot of videos, see where it goes, and then see if I can like go part time at my job or something, and then really go for it. But I really switched up my philosophy on that a lot because I don't know, it becomes mentally degrading at times when you do things and you don't see progress that you want to see or whatever.
Yeah.
So I appreciate everyone that watches my videos and seeing it grow. It's very it's weird, honestly, to me.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, there's a plan. I definitely have a plan, and it's one that I hope uh, people will like.
Hmm.
As far as like continuing to talk about, I'm always going to talk about music and share music and like try to incorporate new types of series and things to the channel. But
Hmm.
there are bigger plans for the channel after. I am very serious about like what I do.
Hmm.
It's kind of functions as a hobby in my life right now, but I'm a very passionate person in general.
Yeah.
So it's one that I really hope translates into something bigger eventually.
Hmm.
Because I don't know, I just it's something that I want. So yeah, I guess I could share one small bit of thing that I want to try to do this year because I do have some goals to like do in 2021. And one is going to kind of start with like testing the waters of like a podcast. That's going to be one that I want to try to get out there where I could talk more freely in like situations like this
Sure.
longer. And the other one was like more playing off of like releasing merch, but not like merch for that is advertising myself. Um, so that's something that I want to try to do this year.
Cool.
Um, so yeah.
Cool. Well, we are about to hit the 5 mark. So I'm gonna say, like, first of all, whatever kind of paths you do end up taking, I will certainly be, if it's a podcast, I'll be a listener. If it's merch, I can't promise I'll buy anything because COVID life is not one of
Sure.
much wealth. But I will
Hmm.
at least take a look. Um,
I appreciate it.
Of course, of course. But yeah, more than anything, like I do want to say, your passion definitely does translate. And what for what it's worth, like what made me a fan of your work and made me want to reach out to you in the first place is definitely that very abundantly clear love of music. So it's been really cool chatting with someone who likes music as much, if not maybe even more than I do. And yeah, I do like definitely look forward to hearing and seeing more from you in the future.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. That's really awesome. But I
Yeah, man.
appreciate you reaching out to me. Like this is the first interview I think I've ever done, like not in
Cool.
like a job setting. So that's
Yeah,
really,
yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it means a lot, man.
No worries. I'm new to it too, for what it's worth. So yeah, I mean a couple of brain farts along the way. But dude, I appreciate it. You're probably gonna be episode 3. And that was, in fact, episode 3 of the Lost Chair interview series. Huge thanks to Chris, aka Relevant Jukebox, for coming on. If you enjoyed the interview, please, 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 pretty please, like, subscribe, comment, follow, whatever you can do on whatever streaming platform you use. It goes a really long way to helping the channel. Thanks, love you, bye.